So you know how your mom always says, clean your room, and it's the most annoying thing ever?
True story.
Today we're going to talk about that.
No! Throws topics like this at us, son. No, I'm kidding.
As far as this group goes, I am the culprit here. We're roommates, by the way.
Yes, that's true. We should preface that.
I make things for a living and as a hobby, and as such, I need a lot of materials to do so. And so I have all kinds of pieces of things that could become a future project, and they're all cataloged in the back of my mind as far as something being useful, but to the untrained eye, it's a bunch of garbage.
Do we have any pictures of the pre-clean? Because
Yes,
that would be
actually.
perfect to put up right now.
Yeah.
Pre and
So
post clean.
I do a good job organizing stuff, and then I get neck deep in a project, and everything falls apart.
So true.
And it can be
We should also
literally-
preface that it's not like any of us are like the
Super
most clean people.
Speak for yourself.
It's one of those things that once you graduate college and you start living, you just kind of learn to do. That's where your mom gets it. It's like, when you're a teenager, you just don't get it, and then later you got to learn it.
And then you get older
So-
and you realize, oh, that's why mom thought so.
That makes so much sense now.
Yeah,
So the moral of the story is that moms are right.
that's true. That's trure. Take that home, kids. Write that in your journal.
Thank you, Mom, if you're watching this. You done good.
You done
I'm
good.
kidding. So, what we're going to talk about a little bit is the effect of clean spaces on creative stuff. Because we all do creative stuff, all three of us. And so, we're going to talk about how having an orderly space around you can sort of help assist your creativity. And
And specific things that we do to, I don't know, keep it in our minds to keep clean. Or
yeah,
that's more nebulous.
It's a great starting off point.
yes. Okay, so the first thing that I think about when I think about this is a writing professor that I had at college who was super great. Her name was Liz Christensen. And she had this saying when we were writing things that clear thinking equals clear writing. Meaning that if you're writing something and it's kind of coming out convoluted and messy and you're going, I don't really know where this is going, then ask yourself, do you know where it's going? And you go, oh, I don't. And then you have to go figure it out. And and so to sort of adapt that phrase into something that equals clean spaces equal a clean mind, or reflect the inner state of your mind, right?
True.
How you keep a space around you, I think is a really interesting idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's kind of this thing of creative people can be considered messy people or scatterbrained people, and there's kind of this preconceived notion of, you know, the creative type cannot be clean.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's sort
Or
of
orderly.
like we thrive in just a little bit of chaos.
Yeah.
You know, like there are certain variables that need to be changing and fluid and flexible, and having something super rigid and tied down really just slows down the process in a bad
gets in
way.
the way of art. Yeah.
That said, we've kind of come to the conclusion that there is a balance between all of that we can still live in a fluid environment where things can move around, but keeping things like organized in a way that is not only useful but incredibly practical.
Yeah.
I guess that's useful.
So can we say that creativity needs to have a structure?
Yeah, I could see it.
Would that be fair?
Yeah.
I almost also think of it, this would especially go for Justin, because it's kind of like a dance kind of a thing, you know? There's, especially with some of the more complex dances, you can get like, I don't know, this feel of, especially waltz. It looks very graceful and stuff like that, but you got to be like right in line. So,
I have a background in ballroom dance, by the way, which is where that is coming from.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. So, Brandon, in your music and stuff, like we think of music, and when we're learning a piece of music, it's like sheet music. It's all very structured. There's notes and sort of a whole coding system of how to decipher something. But when you're sort of creating a musical idea or learning something that isn't perhaps written down, or trying to articulate something musically, do you find that musical structure helps you sort of get it out of your head onto paper?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing that I do to get stuff out of my head onto paper is I'll record a little bit of it, and then just listen to that recording of me doing it, because I improvise singing wise really well, not so much on other instruments, but then I go in and write stuff down. I just listen to it over and over again and be like, okay, those were the notes I just sang right there, those rhythms and stuff like that. So
using your voice to sort of prototype something before you start deconstructing.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then we should talk a bit about, Justin, when you're putting projects together, how you sort of create your folders and put images in it, and sort of the creative structure of that, and how that order helps you sort of attack a project.
Yeah. So when I'm jumping in on a project, I get an idea of I want to make blank, and I kind of have an idea of what I want to do. So I'll start a folder on my computer and start dropping in images of stuff that I like that's related. Just Google image search. Anytime I'm reading through something, I'll put a link to it in there. And eventually, when I get enough of it, I've got 20, 30, 40, 80 pictures in there. I'll go up and blow it up in a grid, and then I can kind of see it all at once. See all these images that I've collected that I'm like, ooh, I like this, and I like that, and I like this. And I'll kind of go and look at it and visually start to see patterns and go, okay, like there's this kind of common threads of things, of stuff that feels like it needs to fit in this project. And then I can go and start piecing those together. And it's just kind of my ideas folder. So it's usually the first one created inside my project.
And I've started doing that with music stuff too, and it's super nice. Like I just go in, put a song that I really like, hone in on a section, then just cut that section out and then put that in a folder, and then I just either transcribe it out or
so you're saving little basically newspaper clippings of audio samples that you save.
Like a little pocket sketch pad kind of.
Yeah. And I do kind of the same thing when I'm working on a script. Usually I'll have a very clear sort of ballpark that sort of shows up in my head of this is an idea or a way into a genre or something. And then I'll kind of do the same thing you do. Go find pictures and music videos and little references that are sort of tonally or visually or sort of emotionally specific to what I want to do.
Collecting stuff of similar flavors.
Exactly. And then from that, then I start doing it. And then for me, the next step is I start doing sketches, because I sort of have an artistic background. And even when I was a kid, like as you draw a picture of, for example, like a pirate on a ship, you have to start with something and then draw the pirate and then draw the ship and then draw the background and then draw the other characters that are sort of doing it. And the process of having to put one piece in at a time sort of makes you think about what else is going on in the scene. And so for me, it's like going from the general ballpark of the folder with all the stuff to more specific things of going, oh, these are potential scenes, and having to think about it that way. So it's interesting that all three of us have a different process, but it's still fairly structured to get to a creative result.
Absolutely. Something that keeps coming to mind is the blank canvas thing. Starting a project with a blank sheet of paper, or with editing a blank timeline or something like that.
Right.
And
just get like all this tunnel vision, all of a sudden you can't think of anything.
Yeah.
You're just like, whoa.
Yeah.
Very true.
And I remember, I don't remember who it was or something. I think it was a painter saying that the first thing that they would do with a brand new canvas is they would just paint over the whole thing just a wash of white or light gray, even though it wouldn't have changed anything and isn't necessarily like necessary, but it helped make it their own to get things going, just to kind of get everything primed.
Oh, it's kind of like what we were talking about with like when you just have like a project you need to work on, like just start. The hardest thing is starting, and then you can kind of problem solve your way through it. But like that starting is usually what gets most people stuck.
Yeah.
There's a great Van Gogh quote that we should throw in at the end. It's basically like he's talking about how the blank canvas can be intimidating, but the blank canvas should be afraid of the artist. And I can't remember exactly the whole context, and after we get done with this little segment, I'll go look it up, we can record it later, put it on as a tag or something.
Yeah.
But it's super great. Because it is kind of scary when you're sitting there going, okay, I can do literally anything for my next thing.
Now
what do I do next? Yeah.
Something also, at least when this happens more often when I'm animating things than it does when I'm editing, is that I often get an idea, mostly in the testing kind of phase, where I'm like, oh God, and I'll just start working on it really fast, and my file structure is usually a little bit chaotic because I'm just bringing in stuff as I think about it. And then it's not necessarily organized in a useful way. But oftentimes what happens is once that initial burst of speed kind of cools off, I then go through and then kind of, okay, put all the images here and the textures and the sounds and just start like kind of, once it's all just sort of been smattered onto the timeline, it's like, okay, now I can clean this up and figure out what's in front of me versus, all right, time to start this project. Let's organize this. Let's make a textures folder. What textures do I want?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like what we were talking about with a previous trying to do an episode kind of a thing where we're talking about how you throw out a whole bunch of creative stuff, then you problem solve, then you throw out a whole bunch of creative stuff, problem solve. So we'll talk more about that in another episode, but yeah,
Kind of
kind
like
of a thing.
throwing up and then cleaning it up and then throwing it up.
No, it's nothing like that.
No, that's disgusting. We're talking about iterative processes.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Laying down a coat of paint, sand it, lay down another coat of paint.
So it's like putting out a whole load of like blocks, like as a kid, and then organizing those blocks, building into like a structure.
Much better analogy,
then
Josh.
putting-
We're teaching you how to do
Oh,
analogies.
thanks,
This
guys.
is so good.
Guys, I learned
writer
so
in
much
the
from
group.
these guys.
Right here in the group can't get analogies.
Hey, I thought puking was a pretty good analogy.
It is. It's just gross.
You didn't organize the throw up. You just cleaned it up.
So I'm interested really quick in going back to this idea of like having like a creative surge that you then sort of go back and organize. Because Justin's discussed this and you sort of talked about like improvising vocally and then
Yeah.
going back and sort of doing it. Is
Yeah,
that
that's what
sort
I
of
do.
the same?
Well, that's kind of more just it's kind of the transition from the creative into the problem solving. The problem solving is more of like going in. There's a whole bunch of tools for analytics of like how to analyze music and stuff like that.
Sure.
And so you can start seeing how the motion goes and if the energy is going the right way. A lot like there is in film. And so yeah, so then I just go through. I'll look at all the chords and all that kind of stuff and just make sure that everything's going somewhere or coming from somewhere. And then so that's usually the problem solving bit.
It's interesting that we talk about this because for me, as I've been writing scripts over the years and stuff, it's been kind of difficult to sort of figure out a good way and a structured way to sort of handle the creative first catalyst. So for example, when I would start writing a script and I would get 10 pages in usually. And then I'd feel like, okay, it needs to be like, this is really interesting. It's organic. The ingredients are there, but it needs to be more structured. And so then I'd go back and rewrite those first 10 pages in a new document, rewrite them, and it would be like erosion, and I'd have to do it over and over and over. And so did that for a long time. And then I started recently doing something else, which is to have like basically a Word document open, and then any sort of thought that I'm having about it, I can just type into that Word document. It's like a stream of consciousness of my creative process of solving these problems. So it's a mess. It's an absolute mess, but it's all in order of how it came to me. And then that sort of frees me up from in the script page having to, I can still make that as ordered and as structured as I want it because it's like a scene. And if I have kind of an idea that I'm like, I don't have time to clean that, I just put it in this Word document, save it for later, and then come back. And so by separating those two, it's given me a lot more freedom to do both.
You can kind of streamline the process to kind of
Yeah.
do the handoff between
Correct.
things.
Correct. But if it's like all at once, it gets jumbled and order and creativity sort of step on each other. So you have to find a way to address it,
Yeah.
which we sort of discussed.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's kind of a cool little chunk audio sampling of creative process. And we might jump into this a little bit later when you have something more to say about it in another episode. But I feel like that's a good place to sort of wrap, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Cool. I will go find that Van Gogh quote.